Pigweed here. Today we review a logger and discuss a modernist poem from the 20s. Well, good.
Hey!
And what do
All
we got?
right, hey, we got 3 glasses
Hey,
here
it's getting
tonight.
crowded in
Fantastic.
here. Very good.
Hey, how about some beer and conversation?
Well, sure. What's on your mind?
Well, the Burial of the Dead,
Okay.
a game of chess,
Right.
and the fire sermon.
Fire sermon. What?
Yeah.
What? Oh, I see.
Yeah.
It's time for PNC's shortcut to the classics.
That's
Is that
right, yes, where we normally read short works of prose, but today we will examine a longer work of poetry.
Okay. And so today, Longinus has chosen The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot.
Yes, indeed. Okay.
Yep.
But
And,
first, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, and I'm going to be the apologist.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
There we
Sell
go.
it out
You're
there.
an army
Very
of
good.
one.
Very good, very good. But first we got to drink this beer.
Yes, this beer, I had this down at the beach. It's brewed down in Dewey, Delaware.
Yeah.
And I was down there and had one at a bar, and I said, well, let me try El Trono.
Okay.
Didn't pronounce that very well, but it's Spanish for the throne,
Yeah.
and it's a Mexican lager.
Okay. And the throne on the can
It's
is
not a-
a beach chair.
It's just a
Which-
collapsible
Which is a nice
beach chair.
enough
Yeah.
throne. You know, I don't need anything better than that. All
Yeah,
right.
And what did
So
I...
4.5% Mexican lager, and it had some funny hops in it.
It's
as I
got
recall.
some corn.
Yeah.
It's got flaked corn, Pilsen malts. Boasts a clean, crisp profile with a soft balance between malts and Adena hops.
Yeah, which I've never heard of.
No.
And when I poured it, I saw a couple little floaties.
Oh,
And
that's
it's,
nice.
It's a touch cloudy.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
so get in there. Tell me what
All
you think. Yeah. So Mexican lager.
Yes, I think that there is... It didn't mention it in the description, but when I had it at the bar, I got a hint of lime. It's like,
I am too.
So
getting
I'm
a
like,
hint of
so
lime.
that makes sense. I mean, that's fine. That kind of
Yeah.
makes it a Mexican lager, but I don't know why they didn't mention that in the brew notes,
Yeah.
because there's something limey going on.
There is definitely some winey sort of a flavor going on
But
there.
yes, the kind of thing.
It tastes like something you drink at the beach, sitting on the beach chair. Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly. So that's very nice.
All right, very nice. Okay, and it's it might be something that you would drink if you were on the wasteland. In the wasteland.
Yes, it would.
We are in the wasteland.
We are in the
Yeah.
wasteland.
Well,
Okay.
according to so that was 100 years ago, and he may not be wrong now. Longinus, can you give me some facts and figures and some, like what's going on at this time, who are his contemporaries, and then ultimately we'll get into why does he not want me to understand what he's writing?
Yeah. Well. I'd like to start out with why this was considered the day after it was published, and why it's still considered probably one of the most important poems that have ever been written.
That's what that's what they tell me.
That's what they say,
And I think in one of them, first of all, it's one of the most original poems that was written at the time, and probably one of the most original poems ever. But it captured very quickly those overwhelming themes of modernity.
Mm-hmm.
That is, the breaking apart of the culture that was happening there. With the increase of scientific knowledge and sort of the fragmentation and subdivisions of field and expertise, really starting at that time, you start to see just sort of how can you have a holistic worldview that provides you with meaning, and that's what he's sort of. I think that's what he's sort of exploring in this thing.
Well, who is this guy?
All right, so one of the things is he was born in St. Louis, Missouri.
I think
Yeah.
I'm associated him with England.
You always think of him as being an English guy.
Right.
The TS, probably.
And he said,
Oxford and the whole bit.
yeah, and he said that living on the Mississippi was the most profound place in his life.
Huh.
And
he ended up sitting on the Thames.
you don't really see the Mississippi coming into his poetry, except for on the dry salvages of the four quartets. In the beginning, he says, "God, I think the river is this magnificent brown river is God, and he starts talking about the Mississippi. But anyway, so that's part. So he grows up there. He's born in 1888. 1909, he shows up at Harvard, and between 1909 and 1916, he gets his BA in English. He gets his MA in English, and then he completes his philosophy dissertation on the philosopher F.H. Bradley, which is the guy that was like, I believe that everything is mental and mind. That's the true reality. And there's really not much of a reality to the physical world.
So this actually is a break from a lot of things we've done before, where we have somebody who actually has an education. A lot of our shortcut to the classics.
How many guys did not finish
school? But so this guy was.
But he kind of.
But he didn't finish his He did not receive a PhD.
Good.
Okay, but at least he still got a bachelor's and a master's.
But kind of frail, kind of sickly a little bit as a kid, and was he old enough to go to World War I? And
he didn't fight in World War One at that time. He was tall, but he was sickly. I mean, in the 1920s, when he was writing The Wasteland, he was sent to I guess it was called a sanatorium at that time in France, and that's where he finished it up and got together with Ezra Pound. And Ezra Pound is, I won't say he's an author of the book, but he was the one that did some critical edits of it. Huge edits of it. So
Of this poem?
Of this poem.
Okay.
Yeah, so this poem would have been 3 times as long.
Wow.
So thank Ezra.
Thank you, Ezra.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And Ezra just kept on cutting and cutting and cutting, and at that time, Ezra was, older and smarter and wiser than Eliot, so Eliot went with a lot of that.
Famous, right?
In a good way. And he was famous at that time, too. Brilliant man.
I don't think you can have the name Ezra and not be really smart.
Right. So the other thing the other thing to remember that he studied significantly Sanskrit. Right,
okay.
And Sanskrit is the language of the Upanishads and
right.
Hinduism and the Bhagavad Gita and the Mahabharata. He married in 1915 and he divorced Vivian in 1931, and she was thrown in an insane asylum for the rest of her life in 1938.
Wow.
And they did not have a happy marriage whatsoever.
Well, maybe it's good they didn't have kids between the two.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So his first famous poem came out in 1914. 1915. He writes the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, and you all would have probably appreciated that a hell of a lot more.
I did. I remember enjoying that in English Lit 101.
Right.
Much more than... Go ahead.
All right, so in 1922 comes out this incredible Wasteland poem. But throughout his life, he did not live as a poet. He was a teacher, a banker, and a publisher. So that's how he made his money to live. And all this other stuff was done on the side. But really, really important too, and this changed his life and changed his total trajectory. In 1927, and actually we could talk about and debate that maybe The Wasteland even sort of shows where he's going in this. But in 1927, he converts from being a sort of a lax Unitarianism to Anglicism.
Okay.
So he becomes a high English church, and he becomes totally involved with that.
Well,
And that provides him with the meaning that The Wasteland says that he didn't have when he wrote The Wasteland.
Right.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting entree to what my... So I read this thing. First time I read it, I was thinking, what the heck is going on? I don't understand it.
Yeah.
And then I read it again, seeing what I missed, and I was like, no, I still don't understand it. And then I had a conversation with ChatGPT about it, and I got a little more context. And I think one thing that provides some context to what's going on in this poem is that it's the disillusionment that follows World War I.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because before World War I, people had this sense of progress, like science was solving all these things. They had a sense.
Right, history has a positive trajectory.
Exactly. Yeah, that things were improving. That we were seeing, the advancement of man and like the advancement of peace, advancement of technology. Things were all moving in a positive direction. There was this optimistic view of the world that like science could solve things. And then World War I proved that same science could be used to mow down, tens of thousands
a generation of
exactly.
It totally destroyed that. And if you look at it, the Wasteland is doing some of the same things that Nietzsche was doing, right? Because Nietzsche mourns the death of God. Remember, Nietzsche's not celebrating the death of God. He's mourning the death of God because he sees what's coming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then Eliot in this poem shows what is there in 1922.
Yeah, which is
after
this complete disillusionment, a complete lack of meaning, purpose, like all these things that we had believed in and hoped in, and all these ideas we had about a positive future, all got shot to crap in World War I.
Yeah.
And now people are like, what is this world that we're living in?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I think, in terms of modernism broadly, the effect of World War I was to break away from order and the rules and everything that we thought that that this is how you do poetry and this is how you do art,
right?
And
this is how you do music, right?
And music,
that, right?
Yeah.
And now the result has not been very good as far as I'm concerned. But
no.
But I get the impulse of where I understand intellectually where it comes from. That
it's a rupture in myth, right? Because prior to that, there were these great, and I'm using myth in a Joseph Campbell way more than anything, in a way of the Christian myth is providing that meaning and that order to the chaos all around you.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden you get this incredible world chaos with World War I, and it just blows apart everything, and everything just turns into these incredible fragments.
Yeah.
Yeah. What happened to order? What happened to rules? What happened to progress?
What happened to decency? Right. Yeah. So this actually is interesting because at the same time I was trying to struggle through this poem, I've also been thinking a lot about why is Europe and the West in general. Why have we lost our confidence? Like, why is Europe basically allowing itself to be destroyed?
Yes.
And where is this self-loathing, this self-hatred? Where did we get this? And I'm wondering if it all kind of goes back to World War I. Mm. It's like that was the death blow to the confidence of Europe.
Yes. While many more people died in World War II, it didn't change culture in the way that World War I did.
Yeah. Right.
Right, because World War I really, it also changed the way that wars were fought, right? Because they were fighting it, on horseback and charging each other, and you just couldn't do that when you had machine guns and gas and all that.
Trench warfare.
Trench warfare.
10,000 people would die to get 5 feet of land. It's just it's stupid.
So going back to Eliot, just the thing is, 1927, he gets his conversion, and then he writes what I think is his absolute masterpiece. I don't think his Wasteland is his masterpiece at all. It's the 4 quartets. That's that really kind of shows his, after the Wasteland period, his ability to work himself to redemption through the types of the culture and myth that he sort of embraced at that time. So you have the Burton Norton, the first quartet, 1936, East Coker, 1940, Dry Salvages, 1941, and Little Gidding in 1942. After that, nothing. No more poetry. From
I imagine him being a Dostoevsky fan. In Dostoevsky's view of mankind and redemption only through religion, and even if you can't explain, intellectually,
right.
Why the value of confession and redemption,
You don't see a lot of existentialism in Eliot. You don't see him studying. Well, I'm sure he read all that stuff.
Right.
He read Heidegger, but he never really comments on him in a positive or negative way, as I know. I mean, I could be wrong, but yeah, right. I mean, that Kierkegaard does that. Dostoevsky says that Kierkegaard comes with this leap of faith.
Yeah.
That religion, no matter how crazy it sounds, is the best option, basically, to find meaning and in your life. And I haven't read Brothers Karamazov. That's next year.
All right.
I'll let you know when I get to that. In fact, I'm terrified to even open the book.
I know.
And so just let you. But anyway, let's moving on. I just wanted to say something. So This poem is extremely difficult. It's extremely hard. A lot of people throw it in the trash after they first read it, and that's absolutely fine. But when you think of art and poetry, it is so many different things out there.
Yeah.
And some art and poetry should be hard as hell to read.
Yeah.
Not all of it, but some of it should.
So I have two perspectives on that. First is apparently, like a lot of poetry was written for the common man, right? And this is not written for the common man.
No.
Because it's got German and French and other kind of stuff thrown in there that normal
erudite references that normal people do.
It's not. It's written for the intellectuals.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And then, but then the second thing is, I read this thing twice and didn't understand it at all until I had a conversation with ChatGPT. Kind of got the perspective on it. Started to understand what's going on. I started thinking of it in terms of World War I and that kind of stuff. And then I read it again and I listened to it, and different themes and things started to make sense to me at that point. Once I kind of had a broader perspective on what was going, it's almost like this book needs, this poem. Before you read this poem, you need an introduction to know what to be looking for as you're reading the poem.
Right.
Because it's a lot of work to kind of go through and figure all that out yourself. It's kind of nice it would be nice before you read this poem to have some sense of what's going on and what are the themes and what is he driving at and what are the things to look for in here. And then I could read it and say, okay, now I'm starting to get it.
And there are thousands of books on the Wasteland and of that interpretation of trying to do that. So yeah, but you're right. Yeah, and that's what you shouldn't feel bad that you have to go and read somebody who studied it for 10 years and find those insights to even appreciate several lines.
Yeah.
Right. The other thing is the other thing that they talked about when this first came out was not only was it sort of erudite, as Brent says, but there was also moments of it where there was he created an emotional response to the reader. He's like, wow, where you would just say wow for that phrase, for that line, for that poem. And I'm interested if you all had any of that there was something that stuck out there that just sort of that you said, wow, now that's something I can.
Well, I would say the first line, probably the most famous line.
Right.
I was like, I spent my entire literary career with the understanding that spring was all. If you need to know one thing about reading literature, spring represents renewal and rebirth, and and hope after the death of winter.
Yeah.
And he comes in and kicks you right in the knees.
Right.
Let's say, no, it's terrible. It was actually better when we were buried under snow and leaves.
Right.
And it's like, oh, well, that's a kind of a different take on everything I've ever thought about literature.
Yeah, so. But yes, I agree. And that made sense to me after I understood it in the context of the disillusionment.
Yeah.
Because the idea is April's the cruelest month because it's teasing us with this idea of rebirth and renewal,
and everything's going to
hope.
be better now.
Everything was,
it was so dark and miserable in but you know, hope and
Right.
hope springs
And
eternal.
but what he's saying is,
Oh,
it's
boy.
just you're just kidding me.
It's going to be
No,
terrible,
it's-
just like the last
That's
year.
Right. It's kind of like this. I follow this thing on some social media. Disappointing affirmations.
Okay.
It's this kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, you know, you're doing the best you can, and isn't that sad?
Yeah.
It's throughout this poem too. He talks about he bases it on several old myths. One of them is sort of the Fisher King myth from the Grail legends. And the Fisher King is basically, you have this wounded king that's out in front of his castle fishing, and his whole region is a wasteland. And the idea is that the knight needs to come over to the Fisher King and either take his place or go through certain tests in order to renew the king, and that renewal would come up. Also, and the idea is sort of the vegetation myth of, you know, every spring you get that renewal, that rejuvenation. And that right there is a fundamental theme throughout mythology, going back to the primitive and up to at least to the wasteland here.
No.
So you got that coming. All right, so you want, how about if I just talk and then you guys interrupt?
Sure.
Okay.
You got some notes you wanted to go through, or what?
No, let's do it.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, so there's 5 parts of this. The first one is called The Burial of the Dead, and as you said, starts out with April is the cruellest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. Winter kept us warm. Now that's so,
I
you
know.
know.
Yeah, and that's just a total reversal.
Yes.
And the idea is, April was cruel because it's giving us this promise. Winter was great because it covered all that stuff up.
And then the thing
which
is,
just turns everything on its head.
Right.
he says, summer surprised us. And you got to ask, surprised us with what?
Yeah.
And he tells you, summer surprised us coming over the Stamberger Z. So this is a different voice.
Right.
This is sort of a fragment, because this whole thing is just sort of knitted together different fragments. It's a patchwork quilt that's not really well designed, or it's really extraordinarily well designed to be looking not well designed.
Right. Deliberately, yeah. Go ahead.
Right. So all of a sudden he says, this is why April's the cruelest month, right? Is because all of a sudden you just get this superficiality. You get people talking about, with the shower and the rain, we stopped by the colonnade and we just drank coffee for an hour. Where the meaning is that? I mean, that's nice to do, everything, but there's not talking about, you know, meaning in life. And then he goes over, and the lady who's talking all of a sudden just wants to tell you about her memory. And we were children staying at the Archduke's. My cousin took me out on a sled, you know, and then all of a sudden, and then this is the thing where everybody said when they had insomnia and they had really nothing meaningful to do, they always said, I read much of the night and go south in the winter. So that is saying, you know, what is your life? And your life is cruel because there's, you know, it's stirring dull roots with spring rain. That's about it. And all of a sudden, then you go into, and remember, I think the biggest narrative over here is Tiresias. So if you look at this as Tiresias as being there, and we'll talk about him later in the third movement. What are the roots that clutch? What branches grow? So this is talking the Son of Man. And he's talking, so this is really talking high, I would say high myth here, referring back to Christianity. Where is the Son of Man? And that goes back to, Greg, you could tell me, Ecclesiastes.
Ezekiel.
Right.
Ezekiel refers to Son of Man, but then also in the Gospels refers to Son of Man.
Right. So all of a sudden, you know, you're talking about it, and I will show, and then he says, this is great. You cannot say or guess, for you know only a heap of broken images where the sun beats and the dead trees give no shelter, the cricket, no relief. That's his
So,
description of
well,
what
so what is
happened
broad? We can't do this for the whole the whole
Right.
poem.
Yeah,
What is the burial of the dead? And how does that movement? What is it? These 5 sections.
Sections.
Yeah,
Yeah.
five sections.
Five sections. How is there an overriding theme that distinguishes each of the 5 sections?
Sort of.
Like, what is is there anything about the burial of the dead? I mean,
Well,
to me, it all kind of, it could go without sections. It could just read as one continuous poem, because I don't see that.
Oh, like what?
Well, the
what
burial
ties
dead-
the sections together?
Well, what makes the burial of the dead
right?
different from the fire sermon, or different?
All
Or
right.
the game of chess.
So
Yeah.
remember the unreal city right here, the last stanza of
Yeah.
that first movement. This comes from Baudelaire.
Okay.
I think I said it.
I think you did it just fine.
And so, he talks about it, and all of a sudden he says, "There I saw one I knew and stopped him crying," because he's really talking about, this is an allusion of Dante going on the road to hell, right? And so obviously, there I saw one I knew and stopped him crying, "Stetson, you who were with me in the ships of my lee, that corpse you planted last year in your garden, has it begun to sprout? Will it bloom this year?" So that's really coming back to the burial dead. He's talking about a burial of a dead guy, right? Yeah. And who is that he's trying to bury? Is it Christianity? Is it this? What is it? He's not going to let you know. He's going to let you think about it.
Yeah. So it seems to me that what ties together burial of the dead is hopelessness, meaninglessness, and kind of the world is a hollowed out, spiritually dead corpse. That's what I'm getting out of it.
And Madame Sostres.
Now, but just in more mundane understanding, the poem was released just strictly as a poem, right? I mean, without all of the
notes.
No,
it was first published with Eliot's notes. But everybody found Eliot's notes not very helpful.
Okay.
And most people said, "I have no idea what he's talking about." Well, some critics said, "I have no idea what he's talking about, and it's a terrible poem." Other people said, "I have no idea what he's talking about, but it's absolutely beautiful."
Yeah.
Well, all right, so just just go to page 1, and without reading everything, like what are the various references to? So you've got Ecclesiastes, you've got Dante, you've got something in German, you've got languages and mythological references.
References to tarot cards.
Right. So you have references to tarot, but before that, you have
Dante.
references to Tristan and Isolde.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you come down to
Shakespeare.
Madame Sostres, right, the famous clairvoyant who had a bad cold.
Right.
And that's actually a reference to Aldous Huxley, and I can't remember what book it was. It was not, of course, it wasn't Brave New World, but it was another one.
Right.
Chrome Yellow.
All right.
Then you get Dante, and then you get this weird line. You were with me in the ships of my lay, which is like Rome versus Carthage.
Right.
Yeah, it's weird stuff.
So
Which is probably in Dante someplace.
Could be,
as I would
yeah.
suggest.
So it is so. How can I'm trying not to say pretentious, but I have to. It's all these references to that only PhD level learned people could possibly know.
Look
just
how
comes
learned
across.
I am.
Yes, it just comes across to me from the first time I read it. It was like, look at me. Are you smart enough to figure out all the references that I already know? Plus the 5 languages or 6, right? There's German, Greek, French, Latin, lines throughout there. I don't want to pour water on this thing just yet. I'll save it for my.
Well, let's go back and do a historical context of where academia and intellectuality was at that
Sounds
time,
good.
right? So the belief was the folks that were in the college and universities and the folks writing these poems and studying these poems knew what they were doing. And it was a close-knit group. It was a close-knit group in many different ways. And I think with that in mind, they were saying this is the high art of that time, and this is what came out of it. Yeah, that's a criticism, but does that destroy the message of this poem once you get to the level of understanding all that?
Well,
stuff?
actually,
I
that's
never
a good
got
question.
that far. So
Yeah, so I tried. You know, I read it, I listened to it, I talked to ChatGPT about it. What do you think the message of the poem is? Is there an overall message of the entire poem?
Well, no. Well, the message may be that the message is a heap of broken fragments.
Yeah.
You know, that's
I get
the
that.
message, and it's shown in the way that it's presented. It's shown in the way that it's read. It's shown in the hundreds of allusions to Western civilization. I mean, if you want to think Western civilization is something that's worth protecting and believing in and allowing to evolve, this poem is such a part of it. I mean, Eliot at this time when he wrote this is almost a master of what was going on in Western civilization.
In a way, indulge me here for a minute. In a way, having all these references to all these classics of Western civilization in the context of a bunch of meaningless patchwork thrown together things is itself a message of kind of the meaninglessness of Western civilization.
Exactly.
It would sort of be like, what if I wrote some completely meaningless essay and threw all kinds of Bible references in it?
It would be a meaningless essay with
basically, but in a way, what I would be saying is, the Bible is meaningless. That in a way, what I would be saying is, you can't derive anything meaningful. Here I am taking all this stuff out of the Bible, and it's still a bunch of irrelevant, disjointed, stupid stuff. And maybe part of the message here is, look, I'm taking all this great stuff out of the Western canon and Western literature and all these things. And what you end up with is disjointed, confused mess.
Yeah, well, that's actually even more depressing than my original interpretation.
And you know, think of Picasso when he did his or the nude descending. What was it? Duchamp who did the nude descending the stairs. When they came out with their paintings, people were like, you know, what the F is this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
And now we're like, oh, that's incredible, and you know.
Yeah, but it's not beautiful. I think
Yeah.
that modernism has been.
But there's
a
beautiful
war
lines
on
in
beauty.
here, though.
Now, I'll give you that.
Right.
I'll give you that. And it's also just like, so backing up a little bit, you could still touch all of the touchstones and relatability of Western civilization that people that a fairly literate person would be in touch with without taking it to the PhD level and out of, you know, so that I don't know. I just feel like if you're a bunch of smarty pantses, you distinguish yourself by who says that the Wasteland is fantastic versus the kid in the Emperor's New Clothes who is going, really? Is this what we're doing here? I have to agree that this thing is genius, or then I can't sit at the cool kids' table.
Well, let me just try to.
And there had to be some people when this thing dropped that were going, "What the H is this thing?"
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
and you know, in the back of the Norton Curriculum Anthology, there are some that talks about that. Jack Kerouac, when he talked about T.S. Eliot, he was actually getting on, I think, the objective correlative that he came up with. But he said that, you know, he kind of, I'm paraphrasing, by the way. I can't remember what it was.
Right.
But T.S. Eliot is a tightwad. But he wrote some sublime poetry.
So
that's what he said.
So what you were saying there, Pigweed, reminds me. I don't watch Family Guy, but I saw this clip of Family Guy where they're about to die or something, and he says, "I've got to confess this to you all. I didn't think much of The Godfather." Have Have you seen that?
No, that's great though. That's great. Yeah.
He's like, I got to get this off my chest.
Yeah.
I just really didn't like The Godfather.
That's hilarious. That is very good.
Right.
Yes. So,
so let's
because there are like just actually one of my favorite things is the women who are getting ready to go out and they're just bantering about. It's just like you're eavesdropping in on a conversation of a couple of biddies talking about, Albert's just got home from the war. You better make yourself more presentable, or he'll find someone who won't, or who will. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like it's like out of nowhere comes really what I feel is just eavesdropping on a couple of ladies, and I mean, so.
Yes.
But what they're talking about is such a superficial engagement with something that's supposed to be so sublime or so sacred and intimate, right?
Well, it's basically trying to show. The way I understood it was it's basically trying to show marriage and sex and love in a very cheap light.
Right, because
in the same way, everything else is like Western civilization. Yeah, it's just crap. Love and marriage and sex. Yeah, it's just crap. Everything
Well, it's
is
just crap now, right?
Yeah. It's almost like the whole thing is this. Everything was better in the past. There were these great cities. There were these great things, and now we just have it used to be there were nymphs in the woods, and now it's like there's rats.
Rats in the alley, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's great to go back to the nymphs. But the thing too is, I mean, he does talk about how the cities, right?
Yeah, because he does talk about the cities. I do have to bring out this one thing, though, and the reason I have to bring it out is because ChatGPT told me I was brilliant for bringing this one out. In the section on the game of chess, I was reading all the stuff about. It's apparently a game of chess is from Women Beware Women, where a chess game distracts from a rape. And it's this rich, opulent room. It's the concept of wealth without soul. And I'm having this conversation with ChatGPT about it. And I said, wait a minute, I just want to interrupt you for a second. This is what it reminds me of. She keeps a mowing and Shonda in her pretty cabin. And it was like, yeah, that's exactly the same feeling. That's the same concept of just this pretended opulence in a horrible situation.
Yeah, and a game of chess actually refers back to Thomas Middleton's satirical play, and it also refers. But the thing is right. The game of chess was a way to describe sort of the micropolitic relations between a man and a woman.
Okay.
About doing that kind of thing. And did anybody listen to Shakespearean Rag?
No, but
Shakespearean.
but the woman who read the thing from when I listened to it, she actually sang this part.
Right.
That Shakespearean Rag. She sang it. I thought that was pretty impressive.
But in order for it to meet the ragtime rhythm, you need an extra syllable in there. That's why it's the Shakespearean rag.
There you go.
That's
okay.
Well, that's my
syncopated.
Right? Yeah,
they syncopate it. So, going back to what Brent wanted to say here is that with the burial of the dead, we have the dead, and then and then the game of chess is really about sex.
Okay.
Or sex without love, or love without meaning. I don't know how you want to say it.
So we're running long, so let's just go quickly through the next one. Fire sermon, what's that? That's a reference to something with the Buddha, right?
Right, it's the Buddha sermon, right? And the Buddha is all about the compassion, and he starts moving towards Eastern ideas through here.
And the contrast here, the interesting contrast is the nymphs versus the rats. Like in the old times, there were nymphs. Now we've just got rats.
Right, and yeah, that's actually pretty brilliant. And it goes back to, talking about the leewards. She turns and looks the moment in the glass, hardly wears. All of a sudden, all throughout here, they insert some, present 1922 ways that things are that people are doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And like, oh, burning, burning, burning. Oh Lord, thou pluckest me out. Oh Lord, thou pluckest. So that's that's sort of the idea. The way of salvation is through burning, is through the depths of going into hell and coming out of it. And there's lots of that. I mean, he talks about that in a Little Gidding very a lot more eloquently, I think.
And then what's death by water? What's the meaning?
That's a quickie.
Yeah. Phlebas, the Phoenician, the fortnight dead, forgot the cry of gulls and the deep sea swell and the profit loss. And the current under the sea picked his bones in whispers, and he rose and fell. He passed the stages of his ages and youth, entering the whirlpool. Gentile or Jew, oh, you who turn the wheel and look to windward, consider Phlebas.
So who is Phlebas? He was once handsome and tall. I see that, but who was he?
And I'm not seeing it here.
Yeah, I don't understand who that was.
There's not a footnote on the old Phlebas.
Oh, it's in here someplace.
Okay, so yeah, there's not much there.
Right, but I mean, it's not. He really talks about the lack of water, especially in what the thunder said, right? And in the beginning of the first thing, he talks about the lack of water, and all of a sudden in this one, he's like, well, there's too much water because you're in the fucking bottom of the ocean. Yeah. Right? So I think that's sort of the rise and fall of it.
Okay, and then what the thunder said. What's going on there?
Well, I mean, that's the big thing. And you remember, in this 5, I mean, this could be the positive note, right? Because at the end of the sermon, he ends with a reference to Shante, Shante, Shante. Some people say Amen, but it's really peace, eternal peace. But what happens here is, like, there is no water, there is no rejuvenation, and he talks it all throughout here. Then the thunder comes, but without any water.
So it's the same theme of false hope, and things are, April's the cruelest month because it promises something but it doesn't deliver anything. So it's the same theme.
Debbie Downer.
And, what is a sound high in the air, the murmur of maternal lamentation? Who are those hooded hordes swarming over endless plains, stumbling in cracked earth, ringed by the flat horizon? Only what is the city over the mountains, cracks and reforms and bursts in the violet air. Falling towers, Jerusalem, Athens, Alexandria, Vienna, London. So he's not, but so in that reference, he's saying that, all these other cities have fallen too. All these other cities have fallen. So there is sort of maybe a cyclical piece of it. But he's also saying too that when these cities, talking about being a representation of civilization, when they fall, something takes its place. There's a rejuvenation of it.
So we're running short on time. What I guess what is your takeaway from the whole thing, from the whole poem?
Well, there's several, and I think one of them is this is one of the epitome of modernist literature.
Okay,
I think it's one of the things that maybe didn't introduce modernism to the world, but captured it in a extraordinary way. And it's hard to read, but that's part of it. I mean, I won't say he's playing games with you, but I think he's trying to cast his net wide and showing what we have lost. I mean, that's the other thing, is he has so many allusions in here. He's maybe trying to show you all the things that have been lost, or fragmented, that we don't know anymore because we're listening to the Shakespearean, right?
All right, so I know you have a lot you want to say about this. I'll give my brief overview of what I think about the poem. It seems to me that it's expressive of the lack of hope and the way that the Western world was crushed after World War I, and that it's basically trying to express this idea of things were better in the past and now we're living in the rubble. And
right, but at the end, he gives you a hint of hope, which nobody really talks about. You know, he uses the three Sanskrit words. The first one, what is the first one?
Data, Dayatavan.
Yeah, so data is like control, right? And so you control, you learn to control yourself. Dayatvan is, hang on a second, is give. So you give of yourself. And then the third one is compassion.
Okay.
And those are the three things that he clings on to find his peace, which he says is Shante, Shante, Shante.
Okay. Which is apparently a formal ending to a Upanishad.
Yeah.
All right, so Pigweed, what's your take?
Raspberries, pretension. I think free-form poetry is just fake poetry. You could just take prose and break it up, like just do 3 words. Like you just write sentences, take a couple of words, and then just break it into the next sentence.
Well, I've never quite understood the concept of poetry that doesn't rhyme. Just to be, I mean,
well, that's
very pedestrian to me. I know.
There's a lot of rhyme in
It's
here.
a form.
It's a lot of rhythm.
Rhythm, yeah.
Rhythm and rhyme.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they talk about the perfect iambic, that some of these stanzas represent perfect iambic pentameter.
And I don't mind. Okay. I mean, look, Faulkner Cry's work, Pedro Paramo was work. I don't mind an author asking you to do some work, but this is
got to be some payoff.
Got to be some payoff, but also it can't be knowing the entire history of Western civilization from in every language and
in order to understand it.
In order to understand it. So. I mean, I get it. I get the cultural value. I didn't get any personal satisfaction out of reading it. Mm-hmm. And
did you have a favorite line?
No. Just leave it at that.
Yeah, to tell you the truth, I didn't find any line that really spoke to me. But once I kind of understood what the whole thing was about, I think the first line is really it. April's the cruelest month. That's that. Yeah.
I mean, this is still taught in high school.
God help them. You kidding me? Those kids can't even read Great Gatsby.
Yeah, they can't read Dr. Seuss. So I don't know how they're going to.
Great Gatsby has an allusion to the Wasteland, and when he talks about T.J. Uckelberg. And
yeah, well, that drive from Long Island is very wastelandy.
Yeah, yes, and that's his illusion or appreciation of Mr. Eliot.
I 100% agree.
All right. Okay. Well, I'm glad that we don't live in a wasteland right now. And cheers.
Cheers. Good job.
All right.
Thanks so much for listening to Beer and Conversation with Pigweed and Crowhill. Remember to visit us at pigweedandcrowhill.com or send us an email at pigweedshow@gmail.com.